Hello, my name is Joshua Odom, and the name of my project is Fidelity, Bravery, Integrity. How the FBI revolutionized itself to win the war on crime in the Prohibition era. Thank you. Freeze. Just joking. You folks don't need to be scared of me. Poor saps who double-cross me need to. Yeah, you got it right. I'm a gangster, mobster, criminal, bootlegger, scumbag, and hey, I'm a public hero. Seriously, everybody loves me for my liquor business. Ever since Prohibition, people have been dying for a drink. Or killing, as the case may be. From the beginning of Prohibition to its repeal in 1933, nearly 800 Chicago gangsters have been killed in shootouts. Prohibition really opened the door for my crime empire. I was born in New York in 1900. Yeah, I was in a few gangs there. I was never much. Limited success. But in 1923, I moved to Chicago because I heard it was the most corrupt city around, the easiest for criminals. And whoever said that was right. I murdered my way to the top very quickly. Prohibition really made it so easy on all us criminals. It must have been because Prohibition offered us a new illegal trade, the manufacture and sale of alcohol. People wanted their liquor, and they were going to do whatever they could to get it. We had a good business. Plus, the public just loved gangsters. Prohibition was very unpopular, so everyone saw bootleggers as Robin Hood figures, I guess. I mean, we worked in our local soup kitchens, we said the right things in interviews, we stood up to Prohibition, and most of us with an education that didn't pass high school. We were success stories. Everybody loved us, and no one much cared that we killed people. I guess people were just enthralled by that outlaw image. Also, law enforcement and politicians were so easy to corrupt during Prohibition. The Prohibition Bureau especially. They were tiny, and there were no requirements for getting in it. So, politicians would reward their benefactors with membership. And most of these guys were just after money. You pay them enough, they'll do anything for you. Police, too. I remember once I paid off a bunch of officers to drive right past me one night, and I was unloading a shipment of alcohol there. It wasn't like they could have stopped us even if they tried. Politicians were pretty bad, too. I remember one fellow, I think his name was William McConnell. Anyway, he was the Prohibition director of Pennsylvania, and he was notoriously corrupt. Of course, it didn't just stop there. In fact, I paid off the Attorney General, Harry M. Daughtry. But my personal favorite was Chicago Mayor Big Bill Thompson. Every crook in the city must have paid him at some point. He was one of the reasons why Chicago was so corrupt in those days. And police sure didn't make it hard on us. John Dillinger's favorite game to play was to steal guns and ammo from police stations. Really, he'd just walk right in there, he'd steal the guns, and he'd walk out. Nothing to it. Police were very, very unequipped and unskilled. They just hadn't seen anything like us before. Anyway, it sure wasn't difficult getting past law enforcement during Prohibition. Until, of course, J. Edgar Hoover took over the FBI. Now, those guys were actually pretty good at what they did. It was Chicago criminals like Al Capone, John Dillinger, and, well, myself, that really influenced Hoover to make these changes in the Bureau. I don't know what he did to them, but we've had to change the way we do everything to figure out. I should scram. It's the feds. I was never here. Anyone see a gangster run by? No one? Well, I might as well tell you. I'm with the FBI. I'm looking to take this guy down once and for all. Of course, back in the day, I wouldn't have seen any action like this. That's because I was with the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI. The BOI was tiny, and we had no jurisdiction whatsoever. We were only called on for low-profile cases involving naturalization, land fraud, and the occasional political scandal. But then J. Edgar Hoover came along. At first, we thought he was very strict. As director of the BOI, he laid down a strict code of conduct, he had a lot of us fired for being incompetent, and he performed rigorous background checks on new employees. But then, the Bureau started to work well, and the Department of Justice expanded our jurisdiction, making us into the FBI as you know it today. After Hoover's initial reforms, we were entrusted with higher profile cases involving organized and interstate crime. Hoover was a genius, really. He was very concerned with the lawlessness of Prohibition. It was all the Chicago gangsters that really irked Hoover, really influenced him to make these changes. It's often said that Hoover created a more sophisticated FBI using John Dillinger's gang as a campaign platform. He was inspired by fellow law enforcement agencies like the Canadian Mounties and Scotland Yard. He made all kinds of changes. The biggest one was probably a national crime lab that he based on the one right here in Chicago. The Chicago Tribune called the Chicago Crime Lab the best in the nation. The FBI Crime Lab, however, introduced revolutionary new crime-fighting tactics and equipment. Equipment like comparison microscopes, which would compare two bullets, binocular microscopes for examining handwriting, and chemical apparatuses for examining bloodstains. Special cameras were used to photograph specimens, and casts could be made of body parts. The crime lab introduced both ballistic analysis and microanalysis of hairs and fibers. The FBI even had collections of watermarks, tire tread patterns, bullets, and typewriting specimens. Another FBI innovation that everyone now takes for granted is the use of hidden radio transmitters, or bugs, to eavesdrop on a conversation. Once, the FBI bugged a custom tailor shop on the Magnificent Mile that was patronized by several top hoodlums. That bug was very successful. It went unnoticed for 5 years, leading to the arrests of many criminals. Recordings made from bugs weren't admissible in court at the time, but the FBI used the recordings to eavesdrop on criminals' conversations and get information on their activities and whereabouts. The FBI also introduced a national fingerprint database. Fingerprinting was and still is invaluable in solving many crimes. Like the Otto Freund case, I have a file right here. It was interesting because most criminals at the time were unaware that law enforcement can use fingerprinting to determine who is responsible for a crime. Like here, I thought so. The killer left 3 bloody fingerprints in the house of the man he killed. The FBI was able to identify these prints and track down the men involved. A great achievement by the FBI. The downfall of George Barnes, aka Machine Gun Kelly, was also due to fingerprinting. The FBI also improved local police training and cooperation. Training was much needed, as the police were under-equipped and often unskilled to combat organized crime during Prohibition. America just hadn't seen crime at Prohibition levels before. Also, since local police authority is restricted by city, county, and state borders, it's often difficult for police in one jurisdiction to pick up an investigation in another. That's where the FBI came in, aiding local police in working together on interstate investigations. So I guess what I'm saying is that the FBI revolutionized law enforcement by expanding their jurisdiction, creating a national crime lab, providing access to a fingerprint database, and improving local police training and cooperation. I expect the FBI to keep improving as technology improves. Criminals have always been finding new ways to break the law, but for nearly 100 years, the FBI has been right there to stop them. I have faith that they will continue to do so. And speaking of stopping criminals, there's our gangster right now. FBI, you're under arrest.